They called Sergeant Maria Santos just a field medic who bandaged wounds and gave aspirin, but when a massive IED explosion left 200 soldiers bleeding and a wounded colonel needed to be carried 2 miles through enemy territory, she was about to reveal the secret that would save them all. Meet Sergeant Maria Santos, 32 years old, with compassionate brown eyes that seemed to see straight through to people's pain, dark hair always pulled back in a practical ponytail, and hands that moved with a precision that suggested far more medical training than anyone realized. She stood 5'5" tall, carried herself with quiet confidence, and had served as the primary medic for Bravo Company at Forward Operating Base Phoenix in Afghanistan for 8 months. To everyone around her, she was exactly what her file said, a competent field medic with standard Army medical training who could handle everything from minor cuts to battlefield wounds. But Maria Santos was carrying a secret that she'd hoped never to reveal. 3 years ago, Dr. Maria Elena Santos had been one of the most respected trauma surgeons at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. She'd completed her residency at Harvard Medical School, specialized in emergency surgery and battlefield trauma medicine, and published research papers on surgical techniques under extreme conditions. She'd been on track to become the youngest department head in Johns Hopkins history when everything fell apart. During a routine surgery, a mistake, one moment of fatigue after a 36-hour shift, had cost a patient his life. The inquiry cleared her of negligence, but Maria couldn't forgive herself. She'd walked away from a $400,000-a-year career, from a penthouse apartment and a life of privilege, and enlisted in the Army as a simple medic. She'd requested assignment as far from civilization as possible, hoping that helping soldiers in combat would somehow balance the scales for the life she'd failed to save. For 8 months, she'd been content to let everyone think she was just another medic. She cleaned wounds, dispensed medication, handled routine medical issues, and never let on that she could perform surgeries that most doctors wouldn't attempt even in fully equipped hospitals. She'd found peace in the simplicity of basic medical care, in being useful without carrying the crushing responsibility of life and death decisions. That peace shattered at 06:47 hours on a Tuesday morning when the world exploded. Maria was in the base medical tent restocking supplies and preparing for what she expected to be another routine day when a series of explosions rocked Phobe Phoenix with devastating force. The first blast threw her to the ground. The second blew out the medical tent's windows. By the time the third explosion hit, Maria realized this wasn't random mortar fire. This was a coordinated attack designed to inflict maximum casualties. She grabbed her medical bag and ran toward the sounds of screaming. What she found outside was carnage beyond anything she'd experienced, even during her trauma surgery residency. A massive vehicle-borne IED had detonated near the main barracks, collapsing an entire building and burying soldiers under tons of concrete and steel. Secondary explosions from ammunition storage had created a chain reaction that turned the base into a disaster zone. Bodies were everywhere, some moving, some still, all bleeding. Medic! Medic! The screams came from every direction. Maria ran toward the collapsed barracks where soldiers were frantically digging through rubble to reach their trapped comrades. Sergeant First Class Williams, the company's senior non-commissioned officer, was coordinating rescue efforts while blood ran down his face from shrapnel wounds. "Santos, thank God you're here. We've got casualties everywhere. I need you to start triaging. Figure out who we can save and who..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. In mass casualty situations, medics had to make horrible decisions about who received treatment first. Those who could be saved with immediate care got priority. Those who were too far gone were made comfortable and left to die. Maria looked around the devastation and began making rapid assessments. Her medical training kicked in automatically, but so did something else, the surgical experience that allowed her to see beyond surface wounds to the real damage beneath. The soldier trapped under a concrete beam had crush injuries that looked fatal, but Maria could see that his vital organs were intact. With proper surgical intervention, he'd live. The soldier with horrific-looking head wounds was already gone. His pupils were fixed and dilated, indicating massive brain trauma. But as she moved through the casualties, Maria realized something terrible. There were too many for one medic to handle, and several soldiers needed immediate surgery that couldn't wait for evacuation to a field hospital. "Santos," Williams called out, "we found Colonel Martinez. He's alive but hurt bad." Maria ran toward the voice and found Colonel David Martinez, the base commander, pinned under a steel beam. He was conscious but pale, with obvious internal injuries and a compound fracture of his left leg. Blood was pooling beneath him, arterial bleeding that would kill him within minutes if not stopped. "Colonel, can you hear me?" Maria knelt beside him, her hands already assessing his injuries. Santos, how bad is it? Martinez's voice was weak but steady. Maria looked at his wounds and felt her heart sink. Massive internal bleeding, probably a ruptured spleen, possible liver damage, arterial tears in his leg. He needed immediate surgery in an operating room, not field medicine in a disaster zone. Sir, I'm going to get you out of here, she said, though she knew it was probably a lie. Santos, Martinez grabbed her arm with surprising strength. How many casualties? Maria looked around the devastation. She'd counted at least 50 soldiers who needed immediate medical attention, and search teams were still pulling people out of the rubble. Too many, sir. Then you do what you have to do. Save who you can save. Maria stared at him, understanding what he was telling her. In triage, a colonel with injuries this severe would be classified as expected to die, so medical resources should go to soldiers who had better chances of survival. But Maria couldn't accept that. Not when she had the skills to save him. Sergeant Williams, she called out, I need 4 soldiers to help me move the colonel. We're going to carry him to the aid station. Santos, are you crazy? He's got to weigh 200 pounds and the aid station is 2 miles away through territory we haven't secured. The roads are probably mined or under sniper fire. Maria looked at Colonel Martinez, who was losing consciousness from blood loss. Then she looked at the dozens of wounded soldiers around them. She made a decision that would change everything. Williams, get me a backboard and a field surgery kit. I'm going to stop his bleeding here. Then we're carrying him out. Field surgery. Santos, you're a medic, not a surgeon. Maria's hands were already working, cutting away Martinez's uniform to expose his wounds. What she saw confirmed her assessment: ruptured spleen, arterial bleeding in his thigh, possible liver damage. In a hospital, this would require a team of surgeons and hours of careful work. In a combat zone, it was a death sentence, unless the medic happened to be a former trauma surgeon. Williams, I need you to trust me. Get me that surgical kit now. Something in her voice made Williams stop arguing. He ran to get the supplies while Maria began working on Colonel Martinez with a skill and precision that shouldn't have been possible for a field medic. She inserted an IV line with one hand while applying pressure to his arterial bleeding with the other. Her movements were economical, professional, automatic, the muscle memory of thousands of hours in operating rooms. Santos, what the hell are you doing? Captain Johnson, the company's executive officer, had appeared beside her. Saving his life, Maria replied without looking up. She was now working inside Martinez's abdominal cavity with instruments designed for field medicine, not surgery, doing things that violated every protocol in the Army medical manual. But it was working. The bleeding was slowing. Martinez's blood pressure was stabilizing. Johnson, I need you to organize a carry team. 4 soldiers rotating every half mile. We're taking the colonel to the evacuation point. Santos, that's 2 miles through unsecured territory, and we've got 50 other casualties who need. The other casualties need surgery I can't perform in a combat zone, Maria interrupted. But I can keep the colonel alive if we move now. She was lying, but only partially. She could perform surgery in a combat zone. She'd just proven it. But saving everyone would require revealing skills that would raise questions she wasn't ready to answer. Maria finished her emergency surgery on Colonel Martinez and supervised his move to a makeshift stretcher. Then she did something that shocked everyone present. She hoisted the 200-pound colonel onto her shoulders in a fireman's carry. Santos, you can't carry him 2 miles, Williams protested. Watch me. What followed was the longest 2 miles of Maria's life, carrying Colonel Martinez through territory that might contain snipers or IEDs, stopping every few hundred yards to check his vital signs and adjust his IV, using her own body as a human ambulance while enemy forces might be watching from the hills. But Maria had advantages beyond her medical training. Her years of residency had required physical endurance that most people couldn't imagine: 36-hour shifts, sleeping in hospital on-call rooms, carrying the physical and emotional weight of life and death decisions. She'd been exhausted before, pushed beyond her limits before, forced to perform while her body screamed for rest. This was just another day at the hospital, except the hospital was a war zone and the patient was on her back instead of an operating table. Halfway through the journey, Martinez regained consciousness. Santos, put me down. You're going to kill yourself carrying me. Sir, respectfully shut up and let me do my job. Your job is to save soldiers, not one colonel. Maria kept walking, her legs burning with the effort of carrying his weight across rough terrain. My job is to save whoever I can save right now. That's you? Santos, how did you know how to do what you did back there? That wasn't field medicine, that was surgery. Maria was quiet for several steps. Then, sometimes people have skills they don't talk about, sir. What kind of skills? Another long pause, the kind that save lives when it matters. They reached the evacuation point just as a medical helicopter was landing. Maria gently lowered Colonel Martinez onto a proper stretcher and began briefing the flight medic on his condition and the procedures she'd performed. The flight medic stared at her in amazement. "Sergeant, what you described, that's advanced trauma surgery. Where did you learn to do that?" Maria looked at Colonel Martinez, who was now stable and would survive the flight to the field hospital. "I learned it where I needed to learn it." As the helicopter lifted off, Maria began the 2-mile walk back to Phoenix. She had dozens of wounded soldiers to treat, and she'd already spent precious time saving one man when her duty was to save as many as possible. But when she arrived back at the base, she found something unexpected. The other casualties were being treated by a medical team that had arrived from a nearby forward surgical hospital. The mass casualty event had triggered a larger medical response, and qualified surgeons were now handling the cases that Maria couldn't have managed as a field medic. Sergeant Williams approached her as she surveyed the scene. "Santos, you saved him. Martinez is going to make it because of what you did." "We saved him," Maria corrected. "It was a team effort." "No," Williams said firmly. "What you did in that rubble. I've never seen a medic work like that. That was something else entirely." Maria didn't respond. She was already moving toward the next casualty, the next soldier who needed her help. 2 weeks later, Colonel Martinez returned to Phoenix. His recovery had been faster than anyone expected, largely because of the emergency surgery Maria had performed under impossible conditions. He asked to speak with her privately. "Santos, I've been thinking about what happened that day, about what you did." "I did my job, sir." "No, you did someone else's job. You performed surgery that saved my life using techniques that field medics don't learn. I've been wondering who you really are." Maria looked at him steadily. "I'm Sergeant Maria Santos, combat medic, Bravo Company." "And before you were Sergeant Santos?" A long pause. "Before doesn't matter, sir. What matters is now." Martinez nodded slowly. "Santos, I'm recommending you for the Silver Star. What you did that day, carrying me 2 miles through enemy territory while performing battlefield surgery, it was beyond the call of duty. Sir, I don't need recognition. I just need to do my job. Your job is saving lives. You're exceptionally good at it. Almost impossibly good at it." Maria met his eyes. "Some people are just good at their job, sir." Martinez smiled. "Some people are, and some people have had other jobs that prepared them to be impossibly good at their current job." He didn't push for details, and Maria didn't volunteer any, but from that day forward, there was an understanding between them. Maria Santos might be listed as a field medic, but everyone at Phoenix knew she was something more. Over the following months, Maria continued her work as the company medic, but word of her abilities spread. Soldiers began coming to her with conditions that other medics couldn't handle. Officers started consulting her on medical decisions that went beyond her official qualifications. Maria never acknowledged that she was anything more than what her file said, but she stopped pretending that her skills were limited to basic field medicine. When soldiers needed surgery that couldn't wait for evacuation, she performed it. When complex medical decisions had to be made, she made them. She'd found a way to use her surgical training without carrying the title or the pressure that had driven her away from civilian medicine. She could save lives without the crushing responsibility of being the senior surgeon, could help soldiers without the weight of managing an entire trauma department. 6 months after the IED attack, Maria received orders for a new assignment instructor at the Army Medical School, teaching advanced battlefield medicine to the next generation of combat medics. She'd been recommended for the position by Colonel Martinez, who had written in his evaluation, "Sergeant Santos possesses medical knowledge and surgical skills that exceed her official qualifications. She has repeatedly demonstrated the ability to perform life-saving procedures under the most extreme conditions. Whatever her background, she represents the absolute pinnacle of what a combat medic can be." Maria accepted the assignment. She would teach other medics how to save lives in combat zones, how to make impossible decisions under impossible pressure, how to carry wounded soldiers when carrying them meant the difference between life and death. She would never reveal that she'd once been Dr. Maria Elena Santos, trauma surgeon, but she would use everything she'd learned in both lives to ensure that other soldiers had the skills they needed to bring their comrades home alive. The woman who had been just a field medic had become something more. a bridge between two worlds, combining the technical expertise of civilian medicine with the practical courage of battlefield medical care. She'd learned to save lives not because of her title or her official qualifications, but because saving lives was simply who she was, regardless of what uniform she wore or what people expected from someone in her position. And in the end, that was enough.